Now, anyone from anywhere can apply to a job. And so people put up a job listing and they get 10,000 applications. They're all computer generated, stuffed with the keywords that they asked for. They will, they run them through this applicant tracking system. And at this point, it's a mystery as to how anyone gets hired. Just randomly, some people get through and they may or may not be qualified. So the whole process is totally broken.
It is so much slower to eliminate than to select things that you want to keep. On a personal level, if I have a group of things, or say a song library, I can go through and be like, not that one, not that one. It takes 10 times longer than going through with just the reverse mentality, same methods. I like this song and this song and this song. So choosing what you want to keep, as in choosing the ones you want to bring to the next level, is a much more efficient process. It's strange that they've set it up the most inefficient way possible.
But nobody actually looks at the first generation of resume. It's computer scoring, and they're scored using, this one has 17 of the 23 keywords that you asked for. This whole job applicant management market needs some serious restructuring, and some now that we have AI agents, you could potentially look at their portfolio and try to do a deeper assessment to see if this is a BS computer generated resume or if they've got a body of work, because that's the only thing that really selects effectively is body of work.
Yeah, AI has really complicated matters. I was at a dinner party last week and a woman who I greatly admire, she said, sometimes I get an email and I'm not sure that the person wrote it. Then I don't know how to evaluate this person for the job because I'm not confident that they wrote that email. So I'm not confident that that's their work. And I was like, are you actually using your hands to type emails? Still, my highest compliment I pay to someone is I write them a message with my hands. So if you get a message from me that doesn't have capitalization, 3 spelling errors and weird spacing, and then just trails off, then you know that I love you. If you get one that starts, "Dear sir, I hope this message finds you well." It's the corporate equivalent of she brought up a good point. How is she supposed to evaluate this person's communication skills? And I would also say it's a moot point because if the person can get it done with AI, great.
Okay, there's 2 levels of looking at that. I've got an AI assistant on my desktop that I use all day long. I use QDeveloper hundreds of times a day to do technical tasks. But at the same time, then there's the shallowness of, well, can you do something effectively with it, or are you just putting something in and skimming the first layer? What people are trying to get at in interviews is your depth of knowledge and performance. I worked for this company that did application systems for art schools. So now schools had started asking for portfolios of work. And then they can be gamed too, but when you ask people about their portfolio of work, then you get deeper interaction because they should be able to tell you in very great detail why they transformed this into that, what their theory of approach to it was, what the experience of doing it was. Like, for example, if we talk about writing the paper that we wrote and the various revisions for it, we can just tell that story. Or you ask somebody about their thesis, right? They know all the things about it because it's a big epic journey. It's trying to detect fakery. And the problem is it's sort of like spam emails. The level of fakery is now so high because the barrier to applying to positions is so low. Now the problem is the sensitivity from an AI point of view gets to be a problem because your false negatives where you're screening out applicants that are qualified. If there's 3 super applicants, you might have screened all of them out with your stupid applicant tracking system because it used a dumb algorithm, and you'll never know.
Well, that's the thing. One of the people at this dinner party was in biology and is going to a university, one of the top research universities in Canada, I would add. And he said that routinely he gets flagged for plagiarism by these AI algorithms that they all have to submit their papers to. And so he said a couple times a term, his professor would come and say, this paper got rejected and for this and this. And his response is always, well, it's weird if I used AI for this and this, it's a 12-page paper. And then I wrote the rest of it myself because it's a small department and people know each other. It just gets, okay, don't worry about it. The equivalent of when you trigger the shoplifting alarms, but then cashier takes one look at you and go like, meh. Yeah. It's interesting because it's a failure in the technology. He made a joke. I'm in biology. We write papers like robots. It's not a creative writing class.
It's a huge problem. And now we're in this AI arms race because The tendency is to want to apply automation to solve the volume problem, but the automation is also producing the volume. And when I bought my first house, I read everything in the mortgage application. And I found errors in it, and I made them fix it.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure they appreciated it.
And then like progressively with every subsequent house, they've just gotten like bigger and bigger. And now people are like, you're not going to read that, are you? Like it's 2,000 pages, you brought it to me. But it's this arms race of technology producing information products versus technology filtering the information products. It's not the right way to go about it. I don't really know what the answer is going to be, but oral defenses and portfolios, if you're going to hire an artist or you're going to hire a maker, what do you look for? And I think we have to kind of go back to that. What did you build? Tell me about it. Show it to me.
Also, I think we have to go back to what problem are we hiring this person to solve? And I think the revamp is not in the screening processes, but the revamp needs to be in the actual job descriptions themselves.
That's interesting.
Because jobs are out of date now, or rapidly becoming so. So we need to go back and say, philosophically even, what is the job of a teacher? Instead of back to the job description and say, I think this bitch is running her report card comments through AI. I'm like, yeah, I am. I can do report cards in exactly 10 days, full time, of which I am assigned one paid day to do so, or I can do it within my one assigned paid day using AI tools. For most jobs where AI could boost it, it could boost it to a human level of work, not just let me sit back and like sip a margarita. Yeah.
So that the workload has gone way past human scale, unaugmented human scale. And so then you augment so that you can crush it back down to human scale.
Exactly. There was a really good TikTok I saw where the caption was, how my company expects me to eat lunch. Worked from home. He had full corporate and then PJ pants on. Good, let's put a pin in this and we'll circle back. He hits end meeting. He jumps up. He runs to his little kitchen. He's stuffing a banana in his mouth while he's chugging water. And then he races back and he goes click. And he's like, hello, yes, we're not taking 3-hour lunches now.
No, I can relate. I read this book recently on health, and it's metabolic health. AC means good energy. There are all these symptoms and people are extremely unhealthy, and it really comes back to a certain set of small root causes, which are diet and exercise, because there's a lot of crap in the food and it's not a healthy environment. So if you look at just crowd scenes of people in the 70s, even in the 90s, they looked much better, way thinner. They're still smoking and doing other things. But you just look at the body types and you're like, something's really wrong. And the something that's wrong is metabolic dysfunction comes from mitochondrial problems and different issues with the diet and your lack of exercise or how sedentary we are and things like that. So like immediately after you eat, go for a walk, because that actually absorbs more glucose, because your muscle fire up and start pulling in glucose directly. And so it doesn't get metabolized into fat. Needless to say that you're like, how do I fit this into this day calendar? And I've been pretty creative about it and I've worked out some ways to do it. But yeah, workspaces are not optimized for health.
This book just reiterates the Chinese proverb of he who walks 1,000 steps after dinner will live to 100 years or something. I completely butchered that.
Yeah, totally. Well, the Chinese were massive empiricists. Like people diss acupuncture. They studied millions of people over hundreds of years. They did a very extensive study on mapping out what they called the energy pathways and things, what worked. And just empirically, they did a lot of research. And we may not understand how it works, but if you put that much time into things and you find patterns, there's something there. You should give that some credibility.
Acupuncture is one of the more effective modalities for health, I would say. And I think that it gets a bad rap only because people only give up and go to it when they've reached the emergency room acute level of care needed, not early on.
The maintenance.
Let's avoid it in the first place, which is what it's designed for. Acupuncture was designed to be your weekly, you go to your acupuncturist, you get your hair done, your maintenance.
Yeah.
Not sense. I have stage 4, what can you do for me? We have to now paradoxically rely on intuition, human interactions, old-timey Chinese empiricism levels of knowing, because we are drowning in data. It's a full circle Oprah moment where, remember when we thought it'd be great to collect all that data, and now we have so much data that we realize that it has created a cycle where we have to go back to handpicking people, or what becomes valuable is a handwritten email with all of the imperfections on it.
Well, it makes sense because when you think about it, when we first emerged into the cognitive landscape, it was overwhelming, and it's been overwhelming for a long time. But then we worked out systems for making quick decisions and assessments that were valuable.
What comes to my mind is I had these two friends when I lived in Toronto that were Indian, and one got to arrange her own marriage because she was in the South, but the northern one, she would get flown to the gate, and he'd be at the gate and he'd take a look and he'd either go like, and depending on his response, the woman would turn around and get back on the plane. Like she didn't get off the boarding gate. And so my friend got a thumbs up, but she was like the 12th in line because his parents had money. So they kept going. They were like, how about this one? How about this one? And so I think 3 years later, she got up the nerve to say how did I get past the algorithm of this job interview?
Yeah.
And he said, I liked your sandals.
Yeah, it's just an intuitive thing. When you think about dating, would you rather try to find partners through an online dating platform or through a speed dating event where you've got a couple hundred people in a room and you're like able to mingle all of the heuristic stuff that's built into you as a human being works better in person? You get to use your full sensory net and be like, I don't like the way that this one's micro expressions looked, and like he looks at her in a way that I don't like, or like that one over there looks hot in some way that I can't define that really turns out to correlate very well with like
I like his vibe.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of little things that turn out to actually be very accurate. So
yeah.
I think we've created this artificial information landscape and loaded it up with all this stuff. And so sometimes the better you get away from that, like the farther you get away from that, the better your systems and analysis work.
Yeah, because I think even in our own personal interactions, we're constantly screening out or bringing people in just like an ATS. Yeah. We're a human ATS. I was having a conversation with this woman. We were talking about a third person who seemed like a pillar of the community, but was acting a bit sketchy. And I had gotten a bad vibe, so I just never pursued the relationship. I said, sometimes you get a feeling, but later it checks out the reasons why. You have the data retroactively. She said something really cute, like, oh, you were all green lights for me. And I was like, oh, you're all green lights for me. Because a lot of it is like red flag, dating flags, green flags. That's what we were referring to.
Thin slicing. Most of your computing infrastructure is not conscious. You got a little bit of conscious window, but then below that, if you think every cell in your body has significant computational capability, and then every organ, they're just stack. And the vast majority of it is below the conscious level. So when you're making these unconscious, you get a vibe, you get a feeling, those kind of decisions, a lot of analysis has gone into it. You just don't have access to it explicitly. And so it tends to work pretty well. It's called thin slicing or system one thinking. And
thin slicing, Malcolm Gladwell put that in his book. He was a great discusser of empirical knowledge because he took the papers but then made them entertaining. Yes. And the paper that he discussed in this thin slicing section was a paper where people came into a stranger's apartment. They had 15 minutes with a clipboard of questions, all personality typing questions. And based on just looking at that person's space, they had to answer questions. Is this a good person, a moral person, conscientious? And people did really well. Pretty accurate. Do you think it all comes down to what do they call them? Non-negotiables. The list. Women have the list.
The list, okay.
When I moved with online dating from that vibe thing, very intuitive. I just looked at their eyes. That was the swiping mechanism, was just like, I don't like your eyes. I like your eyes. I don't like your eyes. I like your eyes. Granted, I went on some accidental polyamorous dates where I was like, I should really have read that. And I would say that when I moved to applicant tracking systems, because I got overwhelmed with the number of applicants. So with 150 messages, I can't. So I would come up with these same as an LLM in order to try to mitigate the onslaught, these rules to eliminate. And one of my rules was, if I just got a, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
And nothing else, then I was like, meh, move on. But then I watched a TikTok where this dating guy who calls himself Daddy, of course, said, and is from Brooklyn. 80% of the reason I watch this guy is just for the Brooklyn accent, to be honest. But he said, women, he always was like, women, you gotta go through the hey, what's up messages, because a lot of men, they won't put in the effort until they see if they get something back. So they just send out a foul, hey, what's up? But then when you respond, then they're gonna put some effort in. I was like, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing that. I'm playing the guy role.
It's like a filter arms race, just filters, and more filters.
Exactly. So then I thought, like you said earlier, what if I have eliminated the top 3 applicants? Because they're sending off a like, let's see if it's worth my time. Because I want somebody who's very deliberate with their time. Because I'm very deliberate with my time. So I want somebody who's got a lot going on with their life as well. And I was equating falsely, hey, what's up, to somebody who doesn't put effort into their life, is not very deliberate with their time, blah, blah, blah. But what if they were the reverse? They were so deliberate with their time that they were not going to engage unless there was something coming back. So I was like, oh, now what have I done?
And even things like in interviewing, there's scientific interviewing where you're supposed to do it a certain way and everyone gets the same experience. And that seems like it would be better. But I'm not sure it is, because every system can be gamed. And so then as soon as you put in place some filter system, immediately, like the next level is like somebody's got an algorithm to hack the filter system and then an algorithm to detect hacking of the filter system. And then you're just in this filterer's arms race.
And who can hack the filter system perfectly, I discovered, is love bombers. They've got a whole, like, very interesting first. Like, they go from, they're not on the, hey, what's up side. They're on the, like, here's a paragraph and a half of well-composed, like, poetry and interesting, like, questions and philosophy. But it's just gaming the system.
Like the net has been cast too broadly. Maybe it's like, okay, out of this 100 people, who's one I might want to go on a date with? Out of this 100 people, who's one I might want to date with? I think flattening the world and making it so that everyone can apply to everything for every purpose has just created...
when you say flattening the world, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's from Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat, which the idea was that, like...
Is this a novel or is this nonfiction?
I think it's a nonfiction book.
Okay, Thomas Friedman.
He wrote for the New York Times, but nonetheless, he still wrote something good somehow.
Hey man, you know what I used to do? My favorite day when I lived in Toronto was Saturdays. I would go to Starbucks, where I worked at the time, and I would get the New York Times magazine because they had a subscription for their customers, and I would sit and I would read that thing cover to cover. It would take me 2.5 hours. It was the best Saturday ever.
Nice. So his premise was, and this is very true, he called out what had happened with globalization and the internet. So before globalization, and especially before the internet, there was a limit to reach. So
you were unequivocally local. So for instance, just to bring that back to the dating, I remember in 2015 sitting down and making a list of potential men I could date. Okay, let's put some effort into this now. And I wrote my future husband's name.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote, I don't remember who the second person's name was. But then after that was just guy who sometimes walks down my street. Like the rest of them didn't have names. Guy who often comes to the coffee shop at the same time as I do. So I had 2 named suitor possibilities. These weren't even men that I liked. These were just men that I knew were heterosexual, available, and not overtly psychopathic or homeless. Literally. Was my local. So I am a big fan of the world flattening a bit because I went through the process that I'm going through now, and I'm definitely less like desirable 8 years later, but I got 150 options versus 2 named and then 3 unnamed.
Yeah, so your pool is very limited. But the flip side of that is like, now if you get 15,000, like what do you do with that, right? And the whole process is so off-putting that The best ones may not be in that 15,000 at all. They're somewhere else because they're doing up in the hiking club or whatever they do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on there anymore either. They're a good like there's a good chance that my ideal match is also not on there anymore.
So the flattening of the world actually created a lot of information management problems, because once you had the internet and anyone could reach anyone from anywhere, then, put up a job listing, you get 15,000 applicants. You put up a dating profile, you get auto-written one-sentence messages. That it's just an information processing problem. Maybe part of the solution is limiting your scope and just being like, okay, I don't want to try to find the best engineers in the world for this job. I want to find the best ones in my city. Difficult problem. It's the problem of our age.
And neither do I hear a lot of evaluations as to not just hard skills, and not soft skills, but actually like what type of person would do best in this work environment that we have.
It's like matchmaking. But matchmakers...
Yeah, it's matchmaking again.
Matchmakers had a lot of data and they were good at it. They were skilled. So I think that we have a giant Info-Pocalypse on our hands, and the only solution may just be to leave the problem and try to find a simpler problem.
Yeah, I think that the only solution is to actually stop trying to manage the data. Like with my current organizational project, I realized, I'm in transition. So trying to organize all this data, aka things, is not the right approach right now. I just put it in the basement. I wait till I know what I'm aiming at, which is the equivalent of I refine the job description. What lifestyle am I cultivating? And then I go to the basement and I look at what the options are. Then I go to the ATS and I see what matches that. We can't just find better and better ways to evaluate data automatically with an LLM or not. Go back to the drawing board and say, what qualities of this person that I am looking for that are not necessarily tangible. The tangibility ones are the only ones that you can get out of an online anything. What you were saying, how we can't bring our full net of sensory evaluations to bear as a human, what gets filtered out with online online tracking systems and on the job, that flattening of the earth is the intangible qualities. I think that's the 95% of the iceberg below the 5% tip, really.
Yep. Exactly. I don't think you can beat the filter game. I mean, people put a lot of effort into it. It might be like, war games. The only good solution is just not play.
I think so. Okay. On that note.
All right. I wanted to know more about the how to read a paper.
Okay.
Tell me what you thought of that.
So
actually, let's set a little context. So it's actually the most valuable thing I got from my second attempt at grad school, which was at OMSCS, the Online Masters of Computer Science for Ohio State University. One of the instructors assigned me a paper on how to read a paper. And it lays out this 3-step approach where the first pass, you're reading the abstract, maybe the summary, the conclusion, some titles. And the next one, you're going through and scrutinizing the subsections and titles and all of the charts very carefully. And then the third time, you were reading in great detail and trying to think about how you would recreate it experimentally.
Yeah, and the thing that it made me think about was you had sent me a 62-page paper to discuss today. And you are you consume media like nobody's business. So I knew you had probably read the 62-page paper. I was like, how am I going to read the 62-page paper? So of course, you immediately, in your compassion, sent me the how to read a paper. But then you also sent me the LLM summary of this 3-page paper, really dumbing it down for me. Thank you very much. I read the summary, and then I read the 3-page paper because I can handle 3 pages. Single digits are fine.
Yep.
I do have 4 degrees. The thing I noticed between the summary that you sent me and the actual paper is the actual paper had sparkle, it had magic, it had wit. It had one point where he talked about the second pass. At this point, you may still not understand the paper. You have 3 options. You can, 1, decide you might be tired and put it aside for tomorrow. 2, put it aside and hope that you don't need to understand this to be successful in your career. 3, persevere and do the 3rd pass. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a good joke. He had so many of them in 3 pages. And he got his point across. None of that got through the LLM. And I was thinking, because of that, how many things are people really missing? The magic in a bottle quality by the fact that most of us don't go to source material anymore. We go to summary of LLMs. I think they've probably all been put out of business by LLMs, but you remember there used to be apps where you could sign up for a subscription and it would send you a summary of all the top management books.
Yes.
You could read Stephen Covey's Seven Habits in 15 minutes. I just finished the Julie Morgenstern, Organizing from the Inside Out, and I could see in Libby that it said on 2 audio cassettes as the little icon. I would have at one point gone to the library, gotten this little audio cassette and put it in. I couldn't have fast forwarded it. I had to listen to the whole thing and then flip it over and listen to the whole thing on the other side. And now I bet if I wasn't so equally analog digital as I am, being born in 1980, I might have tipped enough to the side to just be like, you could have mentioned the book, and I might have just gone to an LLM and said, like, give me a summary statement and the process of this thing that David likes so much, and then just done that. But she has such wit and sparkle, and her little empathetic intro, which has nothing to do with her actual system, made me feel so seen and heard and understood. I was hooked, and I was going to do her system because she described my problem so perfectly.
Lara tore through this book too. I sent it to her, and then the next day she's like, I read the book and I've done the things. And I'm like, what, did you read the book in a day? Like, how did you do that, right?
So I got the audio book and I listened to it, and then I did the program, and then I got the regular book as an ebook, and I reviewed the book again, and then I listened to the audiobook again while I was moving boxes. And then I went to the store and I got all the stuff and finished her process. I mention all those steps because I don't do that very often for things. David has told me about that book before. I recognize that. But it has to be the right time, place, opportunity to act on it. It also has to be the right source material. And if you're never looking at the source material, it's the same thing as watching Saturday Night Live and listening to the person who watched Saturday Night Live tell you about the skit the next day at work. It's not quite the same.
You know, one of the takeaways from here is that there are some things that are worth going deep on, which is what the how to read a paper is about, is basically don't read it start to finish, which is what most people do. By the way, it's completely liberating when you realize that's not how you read a paper. You read the summary and then you read the conclusion. Then you decide whether you want to read it more or not, right? It allows you to go from broad to deep because you can broadly survey things and figure out which are the most interesting. Then you can go deeper on those things progressively. I think that's a really valuable approach, not just for papers, but for lots of things where you're like, okay, I'm going to survey it broadly, and the things that are worth it, I'm going to crack the bones and suck the marrow out because they're the top 10 most valuable things are really, really valuable.
Yeah, it turns reading a paper from this direction to shoveling a hole in the ground. First pass, you get a shallow. Second pass, medium. Third pass, deep. But you have to really want to put in the effort if you want a deep hole. Like, you don't need that for most things.
Right, and everything doesn't deserve it.
It doesn't deserve it. And it's really funny because I read the 3-pager and I really like that guy's jokes. But I realized I've been doing that my whole life because my mom used to drop me off at the library as when I had braces, pick me up at lunch, take me to the dentist, bring me back, leave me in the library, and then pick me up when she got off work. Once a month, I got 8 hours alone in the library, which is amazing. That was almost worth having braces. I would end up with 40 library books, which was the maximum number of library books that you could get out on a card. So I would have 40 library books. I would haul those things home, but I wouldn't read them one at a time. I would spread them out in front of me on my bed, not 40, maybe like 10.
Yeah.
I would do a first pass paper for these books. So I would look at the title, I would open it up, and I do that when I walk by free libraries now too. I do a little survey, I pick the thing that interests me, I read like a paragraph, I put it back. That's as much as I need of that book. So I would rarely read a book at third pass, but I read a lot of stuff at first pass. Some stuff at second, but then Julie Morgenstern, I need it, I want it, I have time to do it, and then that gets third pass. Then I go deep on it, but not very many things warrant that. And I do the same thing when I go to an art gallery. People, I think, get overwhelmed with art galleries, but not when you think 10% of the stuff in here is actually art to you at this moment. You can grasp it. When I hit a thing where I'm like, whoa, my mind is blown, then I spend all of my time in that 10% of the art gallery. And everything else gets first pass. So I know what's there. And then some stuff will get second, but then there'll be maybe one exhibition where I'm like, yeah, just come back and get me when they're closing. I'm going to just be here. There was a Jean Basquiat retrospective thing in Montreal last winter. I think I went to that thing 5 times. I must have spent 15 hours in that one exhibit because it was good. Most things can be targeted with a first, second, third pass, not just papers.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm trying to think, how is that different than filtering? So first thing is that simple filtering makes too quick a decision to discard based on too little information. So
say that again slower.
Yeah, so I think simple filtering, i.e. bad filtering, makes too quick a decision based on too little information.
I'm going to eliminate everybody that just says, hey, how's it going? As their first private message to me.
Yes,
okay.
Right. In a dating app, like you get, how do you filter people out? Now, if you were in a speed dating, you've got a lot more information. You can see the people, you can see how they interact with other people, how they dress, how they move them, how they hold themselves, where their eyes go. And that's a lot of stuff that you're built to process in great detail very quickly. So there's a huge information difference between this heavily mediated filtering with very little information versus looking at somebody's resume in an applicant tracking system where all resumes are essentially coming in tailored to have the same set of words because they're all customized to the job by an AI. So there's very little authenticity about it. Whereas when you're doing a first pass with a primary source, even your quick skim gives you an authentic view of what's there, whether it's interesting enough to go deeper. So I think that's the difference. And then the second pass, you can go deeper still and decide, I've done more thorough investigation. Do I really want to get into this more? So maybe like in a dating situation, you go on a date with somebody and then you're like, how did that date go? Now I've got a lot more information. How did they go, right? Will there be a second one or will there be a third one, right? And so I think we're using the wrong model. We're using this filtering without enough initial information and without enough authentic information. Filtering based on inauthentic information doesn't give you a lot of good decisions because your source material isn't good. You were talking about the reading of the summaries of books rather than skimming the book yourself. Skim the book, don't read the summary of the book.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of energy that you get holding the source material. I might read a paragraph, but I feel like I got the whole book in that paragraph. I'm satiated. So yeah. I don't need to take it out of the free library. I can put it back. It's not a no. It's like, oh, okay, I'm full. That's enough information. And
yeah, because even the paragraph of source material, it gives you the tone, the style, like the way the person writes. We think that's not the important part. The concepts are the important part, but maybe that is the important part because somebody who writes in a gripping way is going to be compelling, and maybe they have got really important things to say. That's why those things on the internet do really well, where they have short clips out of a long. Talk about Jordan Peterson, who would record these 2-hour lectures, and then other people come along, cut them up, and be like, "Here's this little clip of it." And based off the little clip, that was enough to say, maybe I want to go watch that 2-hour lecture or a longer version of it.
I agree with you. Rather than try to take a large something and shrink it down, which is a summarization. Yeah. Better to take a large something and thin slice it.
Sample it. Yeah.
And so you get a thin slice, you get 30 seconds of a 10-hour lecture, but that thin slice has all the information that is throughout the lecture. So just being aware of the two is important, I think. There's a difference between thin slicing and compression of file information. You don't want to get something just pixelated, basically.
That's good. So sample, don't compress, don't filter, sample.
Yeah. If you reduce the size of the file, sometimes you just get this very low res quality of something and you don't actually get a chance to see what its full potential is. I agree with you. I would absolutely do speed dating in a second because most dates I can tell in less than 3 seconds. You're like, hi, how are you? My name's Lara. Oh, that's your name. Okay, we could call it a day now. Like, so.
Right. So if you had, a bunch of people in the room, what you're doing, you're doing the sampling part rather than the low res filtered compressed version.
Or even, why are there not like video I mean, I know there's not because people would just put like gross stuff on it, but why photos and not video? I feel
think
like a 30-second uncut video of someone talking that I could use a bit more.
that's a really great point, actually. And yeah, this gets back to why I think some of these filtering systems actually work against you. So, for example, in applications, they don't want to take 30-second videos because there's too much bias in them. You can see the person, you can see their skin color, their national origin, and various other criteria that you don't want to be assessed as discriminating against. The problem is it's a high bandwidth set of information. Like when you see somebody talk, you learn a lot very quickly. So it's almost like, you remember chat roulette? I remember if this still exists or not, but
exactly.
yeah. It's more like that's a better way of doing things, where you just like quick 30-second samples of authentic interaction. So I guess sample, don't compress.
That's
Maybe
thin
we'll call it
slicing.
that.
That's like a 30-second thin slice of Lara.
If you like the 30 seconds of Lara, you might want the whole podcast.
There's a difference between compression and thin slicing. And most of what we're using AI for is compression. And it is much better to utilize thin slicing for selection.
I like it. And then go deep on the things that seem like they're worth a deeper pass.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, David.
Thank you.